Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Embers of Rebellion. Episode 9. Chapter 80. Lucian. It was bucketing down as Dante pulled up out the front so I could pick Valyrian up from school. I stepped out of the car into a puddle, the gutters overflowing and spilling onto the footpath. The drains were blocked. The water flowed down the gutter, rushing like a river and filling my shoe with water. I growl, shaking my foot to get the water out of my shoe before racing for the school's front door. Dante waited behind in the car because he was on the phone still, the audio going through the car's Bluetooth. My toes squelched in my shoes as I walked on the slippery floors to the primary office. On the way here, I called ahead. So when I stepped into the small office, the secretary called up to his class the moment she saw me walk in to let the teacher know I was here to collect him. He will be right down, Alpha, the secretary tells me, and I nod to her before walking around the room and looking at the school awards hanging on the brown brick walls. I shrugged my coat off, which was drenched from the downpour, and draped it over one arm as I looked around. Scouts found nothing, Dante says, walking into the small school office. He shakes his head, spraying water everywhere, and I growl when it gets some on me, wiping my face with the back of my hand, and he laughs, running his fingers through his wet hair. He had been on the phone with the scouts to check if they had found anything about Emily's missing son. You tell them to head back? This storm looks like it will be a big one, I ask him, and he nods before dialing a number into his phone. I watch as he holds the phone to his ear, his face lined with worry. Zoe is not answering her phone. I have tried to call 5 times today, he whines when I look at him questionably. Dante hangs up when she doesn't answer and sends her a message instead. He purses his lips in frustration, and I raise an eyebrow at him as he glares at his phone screen. She is probably working, I tell him, and he sighs. I know, but she feels funny through the bond. I feel so hot, he says, tugging at the collar of his shirt. They have the heaters up way too high here, he growls. He had been complaining all day about the heat and spent most of the day in just his button-up shirt, while I spent most of the day shivering. Just go if you want. You don't have to come with me, I tell him just as his phone starts ringing. Marin, he says, showing me the screen. I motion for him to not tell her we are together, pressing a finger to my lips. I know, he says, walking off to take the call out in the hall. A few moments later, Valyrian appeared in the office with his teacher, his bag slung over his shoulder, and I reached down and took it from him, chucking the strap over one shoulder as I kneeled before him. Here you go, Alpha, you just need to sign here, she said, handing me a printed slip and a pen with his student information and photo. I reach up and lean on the desk and quickly sign it before grabbing Valyrian and pulling his raincoat from his bag. I place it on him and button it up before picking him up and standing back up to leave. I forgot my umbrella, so we need to make a run for it, I laugh, and he pouts, not happy about getting wet. Just as I was about to head for the door leading out to the hall, Dante came rushing in, the door narrowly missing us as he burst through it. He looked frantic and chucked me his keys. I gotta go. Zoe is in heat, he says, and I only just catch his keys before they fall on the floor. I can drive you home, I call out to him, but he is already shifting into his wolf, his clothes shredding up the hall before he bursts through the doors leading out, hitting them in his wolf form so hard they smack against the walls. He will get wet, Valyrian says, watching after him. It will be quicker, though. He won't be restricted to the roads. He will be fine, I tell him, walking down the corridor. Valyrian sighs, and I hoist him higher before draping my jacket over his head and pushing the door open. We make a run for the car out front, and I become drenched even worse, my white shirt turning see-through. Lucian squeals and whines that he got drenched too, despite having the jacket covering him. I place him in his booster seat before jumping into the driver's seat. Valyrian's teeth were chattering as we got in the car, so I turned the heater on full blast to warm and to try to dry my shirt a little bit. Pulling away from the curb, we head further into the city, heading for our destination, when my phone starts ringing through Bluetooth. "Who is Love Muffin?" Valyrian asks, looking at the screen, and I snicker. Marin would probably demand I delete that name from my contacts. "Your mother," I chuckle, and he scrunches up his face. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Valyrian asks, and I shake my head. "Nope, I don't want your mother to know I kidnapped you from school early, she will keep ringing. And she probably already knows." "My watch has a child GPS tracker in it," Valyrian says, just as the phone cuts out. "Only for it to ring again." "It has a what?" I asked him while looking in the rearview mirror at him. He holds up his wrist to show me his black watch. "Yep, it is linked to her phone. She got it after I went looking for you when I ran away, said it was so she could keep an eye on me," he says with a shrug. "Where are we going anyway?" Valyrian asks. "To the jewelry store," I tell him, and his tiny brows pinch together. "Is that why you pulled me from school to go shopping?" "I wanted to do the show and tell, I brought my dinosaur to school today." Valyrian pouts. "Well, I need you to help me, since your mother doesn't wear jewelry. I don't know her tastes, so I want you to help pick it out," I tell him. "Mum doesn't wear jewelry. Maybe you should get her flowers." "Mum like flowers, but make sure it's in a pot." "She said cut flowers and waste, you want me to ask your mother to marry me with a flower?" I ask him, glancing in the mirror, and he nods before I see his head whip up, a big grin on his face. Chapter 81. "You're going to marry Mum?" Valyrian squealed, hurting my ears, his little eyes lighting up as he danced and wiggled in his seat. "Well, I hope so, that is why we are going to the jeweler's. We need to find her a ring," Lucian claps his hands excitedly. "Oh, I know. What about Grandma's rings?" "Grandma had heaps," Valyrian says. "Her mother?" I ask him, a little confused. But he shakes his head. "No, Grandma Valerie, your mum. They are in the storage shed, Mum has where she keeps all Grandma's stuff," he says. "I don't remember seeing a jewelry box in there," I tell him. "No, Mum packed it in a box after I dropped it, and had all my grandma's family jewels in it. Grandma gave them to her," she said. "But she didn't feel right keeping them since they were family jewels. Mum said they should go to a blood relative, and that Grandma already gave her too much. Mum left them for me when I was older, but I won't wear them, it's girl stuff," I smirk at his words. However, I had no idea why Marin wouldn't wear it if Mum gave them to her. Mum clearly thought she was more than worthy to keep them. "Do you know where the jewelry box is?" I ask him. "Yep, in the yellow box in the far cupboard. She kept them in the safe in the hotel for a while, but then we got robbed one night, so Mum put them in the cupboard in the shed and stacked boxes in front of it," he answers. "The hotel got robbed?" I ask, and Valyrian nods. "Yep, they didn't take anything, just wrote rogue on the brick walls, Aunt Macy scared them off." Language. "And you remember this?" I ask him. "Ah, it was only last year, when Mum got her 5-star rating for the hotel, just before Christmas. Mum thought it was another hotel owner. Auntie Macy smacked one in the head with her bat when they tried to get in the office area. Valyrian laughs, making a swinging motion with his hands before he shrugs. And she didn't call the police? I ask him. She did. They laughed at her and said it was her problem, so Mum moved the jewelry from the safe, said it would be the first place they looked for valuables, and how do you know where she hid it? I ask and Valyrian drops his head. I accidentally knocked a box over and broke the jewelry box. Mum spent hours crying, trying to put it back together with glue. She wouldn't stop crying, she said it was Grandma's favorite possession, Valyrian tells me, making my brows furrow. You made her cry? I ask him. Yes, but I don't think it was the jewelry box. I think it was because I lost a stone out of one of the rings when it smashed. It was Grandma's mother's wedding ring. She said it was a priceless family heirloom, and the jewelry box was given to Grandma, so it must be the ring, because the box looked ugly, he says with a shrug while looking down at his hands in his lap. Do you think we can sneak in the back way? I ask him. Back way of where? The storage shed, I tell him. Like a secret agent, he asks, and I chuckle when my phone starts ringing again. You should answer it. She is probably freaking out. Valyrian states, and I sigh and quickly answer it. Marin's voice comes through the speaker. Ah, where are you taking our son? She asks. Valyrian snickers. Father-son outing. Where are you? I just got home. Zoe went into heat, so I had to ring Dante. Luckily, Macy is going to take Casey for the night because I feel exhausted today. W3T weather always makes me tired. Well, we should be home before dinner, I tell her before turning the car around at the roundabout and heading for the storage locker. Where are you taking him? It's pouring down, Lucian. Not suitable weather to be out and about. Over the radio, I heard it's going to get worse overnight too, Marin screeches through the phone. Father-son outing, I tell her, and she growls. I glance at Valyrian in the mirror before pressing a finger to my lips. He giggles and nods. Fine, I will start dinner, I guess. Oh, can you grab more milk and coffee on your way home? Oh, an Aria ice cream? Aria ice cream? Yeah, I feel like ice cream, but it's raining. I ask her. Just get the ice cream, Lucian, she says. Fine, I will grocery shop too, then. I love you, I tell her. I love you too. Don't forget my ice cream, Marin says, hanging up. The rain had eased off a little by the time we reached the hotel, but the car park was flooded, and the wind was horrendous. I drove around the back of the hotel, pulling up behind the functions room where the storage locker was before grabbing the spare key from my glove box. The trees were bending over from the wind, the sound of the wind whistled past the car, and the storage locker door rattled loudly. Yeah, I couldn't take Valyrian out in that. I sigh, not wanting to get out in this weather either. Yellow box? I ask while turning to look at Valyrian sitting in the back. Yes, unless Mum moved it, maybe ring and ask her. It is in the brown cupboard. It has boxes stacked in front of it. I nod, turning the car off. No, this is a surprise. You can't tell your mother. I remind him, and he nods. I hold my pinky out to him. Pinky, promise? I can keep a secret, Valyrian whines, but wraps his little pinky around mine. And it isn't a secret. It's a surprise. And you don't keep secrets from us, isn't that the same thing? Valyrian asks. No, because I will be telling her, Well, I will be asking her, so it is a surprise. Sounds like a secret to me. Valyrian says, and I don't bother arguing with him. The kid would win. Wait here. I don't want you getting wet. The last thing I need is your mother going off at me for getting you sick, I tell him before shoving the door open and rushing out toward the storage locker. It took me a good 30 minutes of moving boxes before I got to the cupboard, and I found the yellow box he mentioned at the bottom of it. Taking the lid off, I nearly choked on my spit as I pulled it out. Tears brimmed in my eyes as I chuckled. I always wondered what happened to that ugly thing. I had made it in wood class the first year of high school and gave it to my father. Opening the lid, I see my name burned into the wood. Dad must have given it to her. I thought my father threw it out. It had a huge, gaudy-looking wooden flower on top. We were making Mother's Day boxes. Growing up, I always hated Mother's Day because I didn't have mine around. So I always gave them to Dad. However, it was definitely broken and I could see Marin had used super glue to put the splintered wood back together. Some bits were still broken and had gaps where she couldn't glue the pieces back together in it. Biting my lip, I now knew it wasn't the jewelry Marin was upset about. It was because she knew Mum treasured the box she kept the jewelry in. She had to have known because she wouldn't have put it back together, because it was the ugliest box I had ever seen and definitely not a work of art. Suddenly I was glad I am an alpha because I was not going anywhere with my carpentry skills, that's for sure. She kept it, all these years, and she kept it. I chuckled before grabbing a towel and wrapping it around the box before tucking it under my arm and rushing back to the car. Opening the car, I placed it on the passenger seat before rushing back to lock the shed back up. Chapter 82. Marin. Hours passed, and dinner was going cold while I waited for Lucian and Valyrian. Not that I made anything special, I was too tired and wanted to sleep. So I only made spaghetti bolognese. However, Lucian said he would be home before dinner, and dinner was cooked 2 hours ago. Glancing at the clock, it was 7:30 p.m., and the storm outside had intensified. Lightning streaked across the gloomy sky, not one star in sight as the clouds blocked out even the moon. Walking back into the living room, I snatched my phone off the coffee table and redialed his number. The phone didn't even ring, it went straight to voicemail. Waiting another 10 minutes, I picked up my phone again to call when it began ringing in my hand. A private number came through, and I sighed. Finally, he thought to ring back. Only when I answered I wasn't expecting the feminine voice I heard. "Hello, is this Marin's phone?" comes my mother's voice. Shocked, I pull the phone from my ear to look at the screen before placing it back. "Mum?" I asked. "Oh, thank God, I thought your receptionist gave me another wrong number," she says. I didn't know what to say. It was one thing seeing her on the day of the Alpha meeting, but I found myself suddenly lost for words on the phone. I no longer knew how to speak to the woman who gave birth to me. So much had changed, and I had changed. My family were suddenly strangers to me, and I no longer identified myself with them anymore. "Are you there?" she asks. "Ah, yes, sorry. Why are you calling?" I blurted, without thinking. She had never rung before, not even when she promised to when I turned up on her doorstep that stormy night. So many broken promises, our relationship now non-existent. I wanted to check on you after the incident with the rogues. Your father tried to see, but your mate wouldn't let him in. Well, you could have visited, he let Ava in, I tell her, and she falls quiet. I found it hard to make chit-chat with her. The silence as we tried to think of what to say was awkward. So, How have you been? She asks, and I bite my lip, hesitant to answer. Did she genuinely care? Something bothered me with how she rang out of the blue. Yeah, good, waiting for Lucian and Valyrian to get home, I tell her. He looks so much like his father, she says, and I nod, moving into the kitchen and covering their dinners. So, how is Ava? I ask, trying to divert the conversation. Ava is Ava. She is being difficult. And why is that? Because she wants to go away to university, she doesn't want to take over the pack, my mother says. Well, find someone else to take over then, I tell her, looking at the clock and the minutes ticking by. I was starting to worry that something had happened because I had heard no word. Placing the phone on the loudspeaker, I searched for Valyrian's tracking device in his watch. It's not that simple, and you know that, she answers. I watched it load before seeing he was at the shopping complex and sigh when I see it leading toward the car park and know they must be on the way home now. Are you listening? My mother asks. Yes, still here, I tell her, turning the loudspeaker off. Sorry, I was checking an email, I lied. I had no idea why I lied, but it wasn't like it was any of her business. There is another thing I wanted to talk to you about. What's that? I asked. Your father said you put a petition in to change the laws surrounding the rogues. Yes, interested in signing it? I ask, knowing I needed at least 4 alpha signatures. No, but you should pull it. You are drawing unwelcome attention. Your father nearly had a heart attack when it hit his email. Withdraw the application, Marin, my mother says and laughs, shocked by her words. I am being serious. You have no idea what is at stake, she snaps. Did Dad put you up to this? No, yes. But he is correct. Are you hoping to start a war? It will change nothing. No alpha will sign that petition. It will change nothing but cause issues within the city. I am not pulling the petition, Mum. I don't care who it upsets. It is time things change. This is a good thing, I tell her. It is reckless and will cause trouble for your father. You have no idea what you are getting yourself into. You have been Luna for all but 5 minutes and are making poor choices already, she says, and I scoff. I know exactly the trouble it will cause in the city, and it is why I am doing it. Try living in the rogue's shoes for once, Mother. Without your credit cards or the pack's money, you wouldn't last one day. Nothing you say will get me to pull that petition, so jump on board and accept it. I don't care about your reputation or Dad's. You never cared for mine. I snapped back at her. You are going to start a war. She screamed. War. I laugh. I have been at war with the packs since I was 17. Packs don't scare me, Mother. I learned to live on my own without a pack. Instead, I built an empire. And I sure don't need a pack because I have something far more valuable than a pack of mindless that follow orders from Alpha that has no care for his people. I have a family, and families fight for each other. You may not have fought for me, but I will fight for mine. I tell her before hanging up. I cursed, annoyed she would ring me just to get me to pull a petition and berate me. Shaking my head, I was about to ring Lucian again when I heard the front door open and close. Finally. I sighed with relief as I walked toward the hall. Valyrian comes rushing toward me excitedly, soaking W3T. It's raining, Valyrian says, and I chuckle. I can tell. Where did you and your father go? I ask him just as Lucian steps past me, pecking my cheek as he heads for the kitchen with grocery bags. We went to get groceries, Valyrian says, looking around me to look at his father, who was unpacking the grocery bags. "Where else did you go?" I ask him when Lucian calls out to him. "Go get out of your wet clothes, quick." "Mum made dinner," he says, and Valyrian rushes off before I could question him more. I purse my lips, watching him run off. "How was your day?" he asked before I could question him on why they took so long. "Good, yours?" Lucian shrugs and turns to the microwave to heat Valyrian's dinner. "Worked at the homeless shelter, you should come by tomorrow so I can show you around," he says. I nod when he rummages through another bag, pulling out my ice cream and chucking it to me. "Oh, you remembered," I tell him, placing it in the freezer. Yet Lucian was being awfully quiet, making me wonder what he was up to. I went to ask when Valyrian rushed out in dry clothes and sat at the table. Lucian pulls his dinner from the microwave and takes it over to him while I watch them both. "You two are up to something," I tell them, and Valyrian looks up at his father. I narrow my eyes at them both. "What?" Lucian asks. "Well, first, he usually tells me all about his day when I see him, and I got vague answers. You were both 2 hours late, and it doesn't take 2 hours to get 2 bags of groceries from a shop that is 2 minutes from here," I tell him. Well, care to explain why our son has a tracking device on his watch?" Lucian retorts. "You know why. Besides, it is for his safety, so don't change the subject." "Where were you both?" I told him. "Shopping," Lucian says, and Valyrian nods his head. "Fine, don't tell me. I will check his tracker data later," I smirked, folding my arms across my chest. "No need. I made him leave it in the car except when we stopped to grab groceries, but you will know soon enough anyway," Lucian chuckles, and so does Valyrian. Lucian returns to the kitchen and heats his own dinner up and mine, and we sit down and eat. After dinner, Lucian stayed busy working on his laptop while Valyrian did his homework. Bored with watching TV, I walked over to see what Lucian was working on. "What are you doing?" I asked, peering over his shoulder. "The design company wants to know what I want on the sign." I looked at his sign design. It looked good but was kind of dull. Mountain View Homeless Shelter was also kind of predictable. "You don't like it?" Lucian sighs. "How about you let me design it? You want to help? What about your petition?" "I can do both." "Is this the designer you're going through?" "I also know a better designer who is local and has a cheaper signage manufacturer," I tell him. "Who is your designer, the same one that did the murals along the restaurant walls?" he asks, and I nod. "Yep, I know she would love to do it." "She?" "Me," I tell him. "Wait, you did the murals in the restaurant?" I nodded. "Yes, and the one in the pool area along the fence. We couldn't find anyone to do them back then, and I used to paint. Your mother found one of my drawings and asked me to have a go at doing a mural. I did one, then she got me to paint all of them," I laughed. "You don't paint anymore?" "No time anymore, but I was going to ask if I could do a mural out the front of the homeless shelter anyway, so I can design your sign and send it off to get it made," I told him. He thinks for a second before nodding. "Any other cool things you can do?" I shrug. "No, but Macy did all the welding statues in the gardens," I tell him. "Macy can weld?" he asked. "Yep, she used to do odd jobs as a welder/metal fabricator around the city," I tell him. "Hey, I did not know that," he murmurs thoughtfully, and I shrug before messing Valyrian's hair. I glance at his work to see him finished and now just doodling on the edges of the paper. "Right, that is sorted," Then, if you give me a list of what you want when you can, I will order it in, Valyrian says, and I smile. I hadn't painted in so long, so I was excited about the challenge. Hearing my phone bing with a message, I check it. I didn't recognize the number, but knew undoubtedly where it came from by the statement it held. Think, Marin, you could destroy everything you worked so hard for, pull the petition, or the packs will come for you. I growl, annoyed at the threat, and Lucian looks over at me. What's wrong? Lucian asks and I shake my head. Nothing, I will sort it, I tell him before placing the phone back down and walking off to get Valyrian ready for bed. Chapter 83. Lucian. I could tell something was wrong with Marin, feel her stress through the bond. I could also feel she didn't want to worry me about whatever was bothering her. She was so used to dealing with her struggles herself, I think she forgets she can actually share them and that she was never a burden to me. Are you going to stop by the homeless shelter today? I ask her as she gathers her handbag and keys. Yes, I will stop by after I see Emily. Any news from the patrols about any more Forsaken sightings or anything on her son? She asks me. I really wish I had an answer for her, but I didn't. We had no leads, no scent trails, nothing. It was like they vanished altogether. No, but as soon as I hear anything, I promise you will be the first to know. There have been talks about a city meeting in the coming weeks to figure out something to do about the Forsaken sightings and missing rogues situation. Pack members are becoming nervous, and it might also be a good time to bring up the rogue issues. I tell her, and Marin nods. Yes, let's hope the petition goes well and I get a date to be heard sometime today. Marin sighs and rubs her temples when her phone goes off in her handbag. She pulls it out, glances at the screen, and shakes her head. What's wrong? I ask, watching her as I tie my shoelaces. Nothing, Mum has been pestering me to pull the petition and drop the rogue issue, she says, and I noticed she sounded tired. Marin did look tired, actually. And I noticed she was tossing and turning all night in her sleep. What did she say? That I would start a war, she says with a shrug. Funny, your father said something along those lines at the hospital, I tell her. Marin chews her lip nervously. What war, though, we say simultaneously, and she giggles. Jinx, I tell her while getting to my feet. I have no idea. Mum rang me last night, Marin explains. So that is why you have been in a weird mood then, I tell her while wrapping my arms around her shoulders. Maybe I can try to get a hold of Ava. I am not sure what is happening, but even your father thought something was going on behind the scenes with my father, she tells me. Try your sister and come see me at the homeless shelter when you aren't busy. I will be there all day. I have contractors coming to assess the damage, I tell her. However, I was dreading the bill for that. Well, you are going in the opposite direction, so I will run Valyrian to school, she tells me before calling out to our son. Yeah, I am coming, Valyrian growls, making me raise an eyebrow at his grumpy mood. What's wrong with you? I ask him. I don't want to go to school. I wanted to come to the homeless shelter, he pouted. Not today, maybe on the weekend. Besides, there is too much machinery and people working there at the moment. It isn't safe, I explain, and he sighs. Marin quickly fixed his tie and blazer while I placed his lunch in his bag. Waiting for them to leave, I quickly cleaned the kitchen, packing up the school supplies Marin left out. I didn't want to say anything, but when she is rushing around, she tends to forget to put stuff away and leaves it out. It was a pet peeve, but it made me flustered. Finally leaving, I caught the lift to the underground car park. I didn't go straight to the homeless shelter. Instead, I went to the jeweler. Valyrian said Marin didn't like diamonds, which I wanted to put in my mother's ring, but Valyrian wanted to pick. And he chose serendipite. He liked the color of it. The only issue is sourcing one to fit in the ring because serendipite is a rare mineral and hard to source. The jeweler only had one, but it was tiny, and the ring I wanted it in would need to be altered to hold the stone. Once I get to the plaza, I walk up the side alley where the jeweler is, pushing the door open. The bell sounds to alert Dion of customers. He was around my age, and we went to school together. "Hey Dion, any luck?" I ask, closing the door behind me and walking toward the counter. Dion was looking at his laptop, chin propped on his hand. His glasses perched on his nose as he stared at the screen. He sighs, pulling his glasses off and placing them on the glass display cabinet. "Your son had to pick serendipite," he chuckles while shaking his head and running his hand through his gelled hair. He leans back in his chair, folding his tattooed arms across his chest. Dion looked more like a biker than a jeweler. "Can't source one?" I ask. "Oh, I can get one, but are you sure you want to use that ring?" "Your mother's ring, I can melt it down and remake a nicer one using the gold." I shake my head, and he sighs. "Well then, you best get your wallet out then, Alpha. Serendipite is $18,000 a carat, and the earliest I can get it is in 6 weeks. Then, I will have to cut it to fit. I can only find raw materials so far," he tells me. "However, I already researched it last night while Marin was asleep and knew it would be costly because they were in scarce supply and rare. Invoice me, and I will transfer it. Also, the band, you said it was thick enough to engrave?" I ask. Dion nods. I pull the piece of paper from my pocket and hand it to him, and he reads it. "So much for Big Bad Alpha, Big Softy," he smiles. "Send me the invoice and ring when it is ready," I laughed while turning and heading for the door. Driving to the homeless shelter, I was prepared to get my hands dirty no matter how much that thought made me shudder. I was not ready to find the roof completely ripped off from the storm. My jaw dropped when I stepped out of the car to see a huge cleanup. The roof ripped off as if it had been peeled away. The structure stood. However, the inside was flooded, and I groaned with annoyance. Just what I needed. The storm was the worst we had had in years. The damage I could see on the main street was shocking enough, but this side of town seemed to take a more brutal hit. It made me wonder how Marin's hotel was. No doubt it would have been smashed by the wild weather. Walking over to one of the project managers, he ordered around his leading hand and a few supervisors and designated specific areas to start the cleanup. When he notices me, Bill turns around to face me. "Alpha," he nods to me, stroking his beard before twirling the end through his fingers. "So do you want the good news or the bad news first?" he asks. "Is there any good news?" "There is. The building didn't collapse," Bill states. "Is that the good news?" I ask, and he laughs. "Yep, now the bad news. This just added another month to the timeline and raised the cost." "Anything else?" "Yep, the sewer overflowed out the back, and it seems the entire city's SHT washed into the far playground out the back," he tells me. "And there was my cue to leave because, SHT? Nah, I ain't touching, smelling, or going within the vicinity of the sewers out back." "Got you some gumboots," Bill says, and I shake my head. "Nope, just remembered I have an emergency meeting," I tell him, and he laughs. "I thought you were willing to get your hands dirty for once, Alpha." Bill taunted. Important meeting, I tell him. Yet, with who? He knew I was full of, no pun intended, and was determined to call me out on it. With someone important. More important than the blood alpha, he asks, scratching his chin and squinting at me. I swear he twirls that beard on purpose because he knows it irritates me. I wanted scissors to cut it off. Of course, far more important, I tell him. Name, he challenges, and his eyes crinkle around the edges while he watches me try to get out of helping. Luna. I tell him. Ah, nice save, Alpha. I see, hiding behind our Luna now, he laughs. I'll be sure to tell her that next time I see her, he laughed before motioning for me to go. Yep, blood, puke, I can manage, nope. I draw the line at fecal matter. I will be sure to send Dante over. He would love to help. I tell Bill as I climb back into the driver's seat. Dante had rung me early this morning when he was on his way to get Casey from Macy's. Zoe's heat had finished, although she would be remaining home today to rest. Dante said he was ready to come back to work, and I now have the perfect job as my replacement. Siri, call Dante, I tell my car stereo as I pull away from the curb. Dante answers as I pull into traffic and stop at a traffic light. Hey, what's up? I was actually about to ring you, he says. Can you do me a favor? I ask him. Depends, he says warily, and I try to suppress my laughter. I am supposed to help at the homeless shelter, but something has come up. Bill needs extra men, so can you grab Tatum and a few others and go help him in the rear playground and help clean up? Yeah, sure thing. Just give me an hour. I will let Bill know, I tell him. Sweet. I don't suppose you are going anywhere near the council chambers? Dante asks. No, I was headed to the hotel. Why? Marin got a rejection letter. I just dropped Casey off to Zoe, and she said Marin is on the warpath. I was about to head over there. I will go, I am turning around now, I tell him before ripping a U-turn and earning some blaring horns from other cars. I curse. This was not good. Chapter 84. Marin taking a bite out of my muffin, Zoe looked like crap as she rested her head on the table. I chuckle at her and shake my head. I came here to check on her and bring her some breakfast. Dante had gone to collect Casey so Macy could take Zoe's shift today, and I now understood why she couldn't work. Stop laughing, she groans before getting up and walking to the fridge with her melted bag of frozen peas. Ew, throw them, I tell her, taking another bite from my muffin. She snatches another bag of frozen vegetables, stuffs them down the front of her pajama shorts, and sighs. I snort as she awkwardly walks back to her chair and sits on it. I feels chaffed. Is that possible? Zoe gr0ans, resting her head on the tabletop. He broke it, she whines, and I laugh at her. So unfair. Dante has a jolly good time while here I am stuffing frozen vegetables down because I feel like I have carpet burn where I shouldn't have carpet burn, she growls. I am eating, I tell her, shaking my muffin at her, not wanting that image in my head. Sorry, but let me whine, I have a literal fire crotch situation going on here, again, I am eating. You are the little sister that overshares with the info, I don't need to know what is going on with your lady bits, I tell her when my phone bings, telling me I had received an email. Could be worse, Zoe rambles, and her words fall on deaf ears as I pull my phone out and see the email from the city council. 1 step forward and 2 steps back, always the same on repeat. A growl slips out of me, startling Zoe as I read over the rejection letter. When I see the signing alphas, I wrap my muffin back up in its wrapper, and Zoe looks at me. "What's wrong?" she asks, instantly alert. "It was rejected." "What was?" "My petition for the rogues," I tell her, getting up from my seat. "What are you doing?" she asks as I dump the rest of my coffee in the sink. Only when I do the mug burst in my hand. I blink at my bleeding hand. I curse under my breath, picking up the broken pieces of glass and dumping them in the bin before snatching some hand towels out from under the sink. I rinse my hand, pulling a shard of thick glass from my palm and wrapping it. Zoe shrieks seeing blood dripping from my hand, yet I felt nothing. I was pissed off that my father would sabotage me like this. I quickly wrap some paper hand towel around my hand before snatching my handbag off the table. "Marin," Zoe says, reaching for my hand. "I'm going to try to fix it," I tell her. "Wait, you need to calm down. Just wait, I will come with you," she says, hopping up and wincing. I shake my head. "Dante will be here soon with Casey. And you have to freeze your rug burn," I tell her, not realizing what I said as I stormed out. I rush down the steps and around the side of the building before climbing into my truck. Reversing out of my parking spot, I navigate through the packed car park before jumping into the traffic and heading for the council chambers. Finding a parking spot took me 20 minutes when I arrived, only adding to my pent-up anger. Snatching my bag off the front passenger seat, I stormed into the brick building and nearly ripped my arm off as I yanked the door open and shoved my way through the security checkpoint. Security rushed toward me, and I wasn't sure if it was the angered look on my face or the fact my hand was dripping blood everywhere. However, one growl from me made them stop in their tracks as my aura flew out and battered them. They stood struck, stunned, and blinking at me. It startled me momentarily before I shrugged. "Thank you, Mate Bond," I thought as I moved toward the front desk to the clerk behind it who was on the phone. She hangs up and gives me a warm smile that slips off her face, and I try to relax my facial features, only realizing I was glaring at the poor woman when she spoke. "Luna," she stutters, and I try to remember this woman isn't the cause of my anger. I glance at her name tag. "Hi, Amanda, I need to speak to someone about my rejected petition," I tell her, leaning over the counter and showing the case number on my email. She quickly taps away at her keyboard. "It says you needed 4 alphas to sign off on it before it could be heard." "I have 4 alphas' signatures," I tell her, showing her mine and Lucian's, along with the Alpha and Luna from the southeast borders. Amanda shakes her head. "Yours and the Alpha Lucians don't count since you are the one filing the petition," she tells me. "Since when?" I snap at her before sucking in a deep breath. "Not Amanda's fault," I remind myself. "I'm sorry. Is there someone I can speak to about it?" I ask again, trying to keep my anger in check. "I can see if my supervisor is in," she offers, and I nod, my fingers drumming impatiently on the desk. She makes a call and turns away from me. I watch her before glancing at the clock behind her on the wall. I needed to get back to sign off on delivery in an hour. "Sir? I have the Blood Luna here. She wants to speak with you." I blink at what she called me. Hearing them call Lucian, that was one thing, but me? "I understand, sir. I will let her know," she says before hanging up the phone. She turns in her seat and smiles apologetically at me. "He is in a meeting and said you would have to book an appointment," she says, shrinking in her seat. I purse my lips. This was some BT. I could guarantee they wouldn't pull this with my mate. "Your supervisor's name, please?" I ask. "Scott Peters, ma'am, ICL, CK my tongue." Of course, he won't see me. He was a member of my father's pack. Thank you, I tell her, turning on my heel to leave and heading for the doors. The security staff quickly opens the little gate I barged through on my way in, and I see another waiting there with a bandage in his hand. Sniffing the air, I could tell he was one of Alpha Nixon's pack members. He nods to me when I take it from him. Thank you, I murmur, pushing the door open with my shoulder. Getting back to my car, I stare out the windscreen, trying to think. My father rejected the petition, and my mother rejected it. That stung more than it should for some reason, but seeing my father's signature on the email really got to me. Even after all these years, he couldn't do one decent thing, not even for his disgraced daughter. This was bigger than me, it wasn't for me, and still, he rejected it. It was like he was shunning me all over again. When would I be enough? I blinked the tears away. And Valerie's words came to my ears. They don't deserve your tears. Knowing she was right, I sniffled and wiped them away. I didn't need them, I proved that. But that didn't mean I didn't want them. Miss what I once had. I wanted Valyrian to know where I came from, to know the parents who raised me before they shunned me. Starting my car, I head back to the hotel. Halfway home, my anger was still festering beneath the surface, my emotions trying to strangle me. My workers didn't deserve my anger, I thought to myself. Ripping the car off to the side of the road, I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, debating what my next move should be. FK it. I growl, glancing in the side mirrors. When no cars are coming, I rip a U-turn heading in the opposite direction to the hotel. I floor my beast, the engine growling just like me as I head back to the one place I have not been to in years. I head to the place I once called home and to the very man who shunned me. He didn't deserve my tears, but he deserved my anger, which is what he would be met with. Coming to the border patrols, they wave me down to pull over, but I flip them off while laughing my head off as my truck smashes through their boom gate, ripping it off before heading to the pack house. If my father wasn't already alerted to the border breach, he would hear me coming with the way the engine roared as I put my foot down, heading for the center of his pack land. What should have been my pack lands? Chapter 85. Lucian caught in traffic on the way to the council chambers. I tried to ring Marin repeatedly. Her anger was all-consuming, and I was now worried she would do something reckless. The traffic backed up only added to my anxiety. When her fury became too much through the bond, I found myself becoming angered by it. Honking my horn, I tried to see around the cars ahead to see what was holding up traffic. Only then do I notice the police lights flashing and realize it was a accident. How? It is a straight stretch of road. How did someone take out the only traffic light pole on the center median strip? I shake my head, annoyed. Drumming my fingers impatiently on the steering wheel, I try to call her again, but no answer. Yet her anger slowly simmered down as I felt her start to become overwhelmed. Her emotions all over the place made me feel manic. I had been waiting for 10 minutes, and we hadn't moved an inch. However, when I felt through the bond she was moving further away, my heart raced, wondering where she was going. Her anger had returned full force, maybe even angrier, and my heart raced and thumped wildly in my chest as panic set in. Sticking my head out the window, I see the tow truck start hauling the wrecked vehicle away. Surprisingly, the buffoon driver survived but was clearly intoxicated as he stumbled over his feet when I noticed Officer Derek dragging him into his wagon's back. Yes. He is one of my guys. Sticking my fingers in my mouth, I whistled to grab his attention. He looks up the line of cars backed up, and I open the mind link. Clear the other side of the road. I need to get my mate, I tell him. He nods, jumping in his car before turning the sirens on and pushing into the oncoming traffic while workers tried to remove the busted light pole. Leaving his sirens on, I pulled into oncoming traffic that had moved to the shoulder of the road before coming up behind him. Following behind his car as he forced the traffic to move. Once I was on a clear stretch, he moved over so I could overtake him, and I pressed my foot down on the gas headed for the council chambers, yet the closer I got, the more I felt the need to keep going. Passing the council chambers, I do not see her truck parked and curse, knowing where she went. There was only one pack in the direction I felt the tether forcing me to, and that was Shadow Pack, her father's pack. This woman would be the death of me. She was going to give me a Shthiart attack, I thought as I raced to get to her. Coming to the gated community, I slowed down when I noticed the guards weren't posted like usual, and the boom gate was smashed all over the ground, splintered wood in chunks littered the road. FK. Shaking my head, I head toward the pack house. After a few more minutes of me tearing up the streets, I come to Alpha John Street to find people lining the streets and all looking toward the pack house. I soon find out why as people jump out of the way of my car before pulling up out front to find Marin, Ava, and John having a confrontation. Marin Border Patrol shifted instantly, chasing after my car. I don't stop. Instead, I navigated around the suburb I hadn't been through in years. I ended up driving past my old street, which was a cul-de-sac. I cursed. Slamming my foot down on the brake, my truck came to a screeching halt before shoving it in reverse, making the border patrols chasing me skid along the road and scatter out of my way as I reversed back before spinning the wheel and flooring it again. Howls rang out loudly, alerting pack members to the intruder, yet I was not an intruder but by birthright their true alpha. Driving up the street, I begin to slow as déjà vu hits me. The street looked the same, the houses precisely the same as I pulled into the driveway and hit the brakes before smashing at the end of my father's black Mustang parked in the driveway. My old beastie would have destroyed it, in some ways I wouldn't have minded seeing my bulber imprinted in its backend. My father's warriors circle around the car, growling and snarling, but I pay them no mind as I toss the door open and hop out. I was furious, murderous even. Never in my life have I been so angry before. No one, not even Lucian, had pulled anger out of me like this. It briefly came to mind that maybe it was years of pent-up anger, and my father was the tipping point that opened the floodgates up, also unleashing something else, my aura. Slamming my door, I silently apologized to my beloved car for mistreating it. Wolves had circled my car but I was furious and not in the mood. Recognizing me or maybe recognizing my mate's pack scent, scratch that, my pack scent, I was their Luna now, making them also mine. They backed up as I stalked around my car toward the front door. Their eyes tracked my every move. Stepping onto the lawn, the front door bursts open, and my mother steps out, her shock dominating her features as she cupped her mouth with her hands. Marin, she murmurs as I move toward her, her warriors following at my heels, ready to protect their Luna if needed. My father's stomping footsteps could be heard from outside as he stomped through the house. The creak of the screen door opens, and it bangs hard against the wall on the porch. What is the meaning of this, Marin? My border patrol said you smashed through my barriers? No, hello, father. I ask, stopping at the bottom steps as he stomped down them to stop in front of me. You have no business being here, Marin, he boomed. I wouldn't be here except you signed my rejection letter for the petition I handed in yesterday. I yell back at him just as the door opens, and I see Ava step out. Oh, was she a defiant piece of work? Ava waves her fingers at me, and I smirk as she strolls down the steps, slapping my mother's hands away as she tries to stop her. Ava smirks like she had been waiting for this showdown all her life and wanted a front row seat. Get inside. Ava, my father snaps at her as she walks past him to lean on the hood of my father's car. He growls at her when she doesn't listen. Sign the petition, Dad, I tell him, diverting his attention away from her. He turns his head to glare at me and takes a step forward. The shock on his face when I didn't move made his eyebrows rise and almost disappear into his hairline. Ava laughs, falling into fits of giggles holding her stomach, and my father snarls at her before nodding to one of his men. When I felt the strange tingling sensation rushing over me, he tried to use his aura on me, and it had no effect whatsoever. One of Dad's warriors, Lance, shifts back to grab Ava and drag her inside. Her shriek had me turning my head from my father to look at him. Do not touch my sister, I warned him. When I see his hand reach for her arm, he freezes, glancing at my father, who waves him off. We can discuss this inside, he says to me before turning his back on me and heading for the steps. No, here will do, Alpha John, I tell him, and he stops. He turned slowly on the step, and my mother looked terrified behind him as he turned to face me. He glances around the cul-de-sac, and I turn to see what he is looking at. Pack members flooded the footpaths as they came out of their houses to see the commotion. I shake my head. Same all over again. All he cared about was his reputation and how he looked to others. This is a family matter, Marin. We will talk inside. No need to air our dirty laundry for the world to see, he growls, his eyes flickering black. I laugh and shake my head. What now I am family? Funny, last I checked, you shunned me and banished me from the pack along with your grandson, the Blood Alpha's son. I tell him. My father growls, his eyes darting around to his pack members who watched on. Inside, he spat through gritted teeth. No, you won't save face this time. Now do the right thing and sign off on the petition, I tell him. This debate will not be settled in front of my pack, he snarls, stomping back down the steps. You mean my pack? I am the rightful heir to your pack. I tell him, and murmurs break out around us at the challenge. Sign the petition, John, or you leave me no choice, I tell him. Despite my blistering hot rage at him, I was surprised at how cold and calm my voice came out. Ava laughs, and my mother's mouth opens and closes like a fish as she looks nervously between us. The sound of screeching tires and the roar of an engine tearing through the streets could be heard easily as the car drifted through the streets. I knew it was Lucian. I could feel him getting closer to me through the bond, his panicked voice flitting through my head, wanting to know what was going on and if I was all right, yet I couldn't answer without becoming distracted. My father laughs. You dare come here and threaten me, he growls. It's not a threat, Alpha. Threats mean you can back out, and mere words, not actions. I intend to do what I say. Words are no use to me. Actions are. So final warning, I tell him. He laughs and shakes his head, stepping down the last step. Now he was pissed off. I wouldn't back down, not this time. I wasn't a little girl anymore. I wasn't a child, and one thing being on my own for so long showed me is I didn't need a pack to fight for me. I could stand on my own 2 feet and still succeed. He scoffs, folding his arms across his chest. Think Marin, just because you have Alpha Lucian behind you now doesn't mean I will submit. Your mate doesn't scare me. I don't need him to challenge you, and I would never ask him to, but as the rightful heir to this pack, I have every right to challenge you for my title. Now sign the petition. This isn't about me, or you. It is the right thing to do. They are rogues for a reason, Marin, you can't expect us to suddenly grant them back their rights for their misdoings, he states, and everyone murmurs in agreement as whispers break out from the crowd we have gathered. Turning, I see most of them are in agreement with my father, which just makes this even more disgusting. They were sheep, all of them. Misdoings? They are rogue for having a child, the same as all of you here. The only difference is they were banished for who fathered them, their children then forced to live in poverty and with the weight of their parents' so-called misdeed on their shoulders, labeling them for something that shouldn't be shameful, I tell them. How can you say that? They are homewreckers, comes Embers' voice from somewhere in the crowd gathered. I turned to look for her, and she stepped out from behind my father's beta, who was also his neighbor and her father. So, what does that make Micah? I ask her. You dare label my friend because your mate stuck him someone that wasn't you? Sorry to tell you, Amber, clearly you aren't aware how a child is made, you seem to have it stuck in your head that Micah tripped and fell. My crude words earned some whispers and a couple of laughs, but I was done being shamed, done hearing the term rogue. She should know better, Amber screams, her face turning red. And so should he. They had S*X, and she got pregnant. Yet she is punished for it. How is that fair? How is any of it fair? I ask. Fools, the lot of them. It makes me laugh. I could call out, I look around at all the staring faces. Easily 10 men here I know that fathered an illegitimate child. I yell and I glance around to see some of the men stiffen. You call us for raising the children you turned your backs on, yet we are the deadbeats, the scum of the city? The ones labeled, so where are all your labels, hey? Punishing your own children for something they had no part in, they never asked to exist. That was the decision of 2 consenting adults that had S*X, yet you shame them too for who their mother is, they made that mistake. They brought it on themselves. We are all taught the same thing to save ourselves for our mates. I did the right thing, yet your friend has a child with my mate. Amber screams at me. No, Amber, she had sex and got pregnant. Don't stand here and make yourself out to be better than her, just because no one here is willing to talk about the fact that the beta's daughter was also the school bike, doesn't make you any better just because you didn't get knocked up. How dare you, I am the beta. Half the football team ran through you from what I remember of school, but let's not mention that, I tell her. And let's not forget half the school. Daddy must be so proud, Ava chimes in behind me. Whoa, clearly, these 2 weren't friends anymore. Ava, stay out of it, my father snapped at her. Seconds later, Lucian's car screeched and drifted around the corner down the end of the street. Everyone on the road jumped out of his way as his car screeched to a stop out the front of my father's house. He jumps out of his car and growls, and everyone jumps back as my mate gets out, stalking toward us only to stop when Ava keeps arguing with my father. Why, it's the truth. What Marin says is the truth. You all shunned my sister, your future alpha, because she had a kid. Well, joke's on you, isn't it, because it turns out she wasn't a rogue and mates to the most notorious alpha in the city, the very man who fathered her child. Ava says, pushing off the car to stand beside me as I confront the pack that should have been mine and my father. But you knew that? Didn't you, father? I knew it. We all knew it. Only one bloodline has those eyes, Ava continues, making me gasp in a breath as I turn to face my father. I glance at my mother, who looks away, confirming her words. Can't have that, can we, Dad? Daddy's little girl sleeping with her father's rival? So instead, You shun her, sweep her disgrace under the rug, Ava says. I press my lips in a line. Her words stung. What I wasn't expecting was for him to admit it, especially in front of Lucian. Of course, I knew. Do you think I didn't check hotel security cameras when neither of you returned home? I knew exactly where you were and whose room you were in. Who do you think had the security cameras wiped? He bellowed. My father points at an angry shaking finger at me. You ruined everything. You had one job, Marin, and you disobeyed me. He yells, you nearly cost me my pack. My brows furrow at his words, which made no sense to me whatsoever. Me having a child was the downfall of his pack? It made no sense. However, upon hearing my father's words, Lucian growled before taking a step forward and swinging at my father. My father, blinded by his rage, didn't see it coming, or by the time he did, he had no chance to block it as Lucian's fist connected with his face. Chapter 86. My father stumbled back. Blood spurted from his broken nose, but Lucian swung again, knocking my father down before pouncing on him and raining blow after blow while my father tried to block his punches. My father's warriors that chased me here raced toward Lucian as he pummeled my father. My father snarled, blocking the next hit and punching Lucian in the ribs, then splitting Lucian's eyebrow open with his next hit, and my heart raced as my father's wolves circled around us, trying to get to Lucian without attacking my father. Lucian punches my father again. When my father lifted his leg and kicked Lucian in the chest, my mother screamed as they fought for supremacy. Lucian is forced back and now an open target. The wolves charged toward him and I gasped, tossing myself in their way. Stand down, I screamed, and my aura erupted out. My aura washed over them, and they all froze. The realization that my command actually worked on them shocked me. However, I was technically their true alpha, but still I thought for sure my command would have no effect on my father's pack since I was no longer a member. Lucian snarls and my father went to tackle him when Ava shoved herself between them. Both of them were breathing heavily in their rage, and I can feel that Lucian was on the verge of shifting. I grabbed his arm, pushing him away while Ava and my father stood off. She was tiny between the two alphas, and if they attacked each other again, she would get caught in the crossfire, and so would I. Thankfully, my mother rushes down the steps, tears streaking her face as she grabs my father's arm, tugging him back. You knew I had a child. Lucian snarls behind me and tries to push me aside to get to my father again. My hand hits his chest as he goes to attack him. Yes, he had every right to be pissed at my father, but this wasn't his fight. We are also severely outnumbered. This wasn't supposed to happen, though the information was shocking that he knew all along. I didn't want this to become a fight. Not for Lucian, anyway. I came here, and I will not look weak by hiding behind my mate. My father shrugs my mother's hand off and wipes his nose with the back of his hand and spits blood on the ground. Of course, I knew. I wasn't about to hand over my daughter to the likes of you to use against me, my father snarls. But it's all right that you try to palm your other daughter off to him years later, I scoff. Yes, to clean up the mess you made. All you had to do was have the Marin. Instead, now you have put my entire pack at risk for breaking the treaty. How was I supposed to know Lucian would turn out to be your mate? My father snarls. What treaty? I had a baby. A son, a precious little boy, your grandson. You didn't just punish me, you punished him. You punished my son because of who his father is? Yes, because you were promised to another, he bellowed. Your future was planned out, and you ruined it all, my father screams at me. John, my mother gasps behind him. To who? Lucian demands with an angry growl. My father glares at him before turning his attention back to me. You have done enough damage, Marin. Now get off my pack lands, my father says, turning to walk inside. Sign the petition, Dad. You owe me this. I tell him, and he stops. His entire back tenses as he turns to face me. Oh, you? I saved you, he screams at me and I laugh. You saved me? No, you abandoned me. You tossed me out in the rain and threw your grandson and me to the streets to fend for ourselves. You didn't save me, but I should thank you. Because if you didn't, I would be wearing the same rose-colored glasses as the rest of you here. I tell him before looking at the crowd gathered. You are all blinded by your own ignorance and ego. Blind to those that reside in the city, those you all once promised to protect. Packs are supposed to be family. Not one of you here knows the meaning of the word. If you did, your children and grandchildren wouldn't be living on the streets. Wouldn't be living in deplorable conditions because of a label you bestowed upon their mothers, your own kids. I screamed at them. The children you watched grow, the same children you taught how to use a spoon, how to talk. You claim you are the city's elite, better than them, but you're not. Because despite the labels you gave them, they stood up when the rest of you backed away. They stood up and raised the children that your mates pretend they don't have. And if you think you're good parents, then why aren't you fighting for them? Love, nurture, protect, that is what a parent is, and not one you deserve that title, I tell them. They whispered amongst themselves, and I noticed more of my father's warriors had appeared amongst the crowd, some in wolf form as they crept closer. I chuckle. He would have them attack his own daughter over the truth. I suggest you leave Marin, my mother murmurs, glancing around nervously before looking at my father. He looked smug and folded his arms across his chest in a show of intimidation. Yet I don't scare easily, not anymore. What should have frightened me no longer does. It was one thing being a rogue showed me. Fear changes and morphs into something else. You don't fear being made forsaken. You fear the next day and how you will feed your child. You fear them growing up with the label you hold. You fear the opportunities you know they will miss out on, you fear them being suppressed and silenced. I refused to be silent, yet I knew Lucian and I were severely outnumbered here if my father ordered his warriors to attack. Our pack wouldn't get here before they ripped us apart, and there is a reason my father has the status he does, why he seconded Alpha Lucian's pack because they were just as lethal. The only difference is they didn't have his pack's numbers. But numbers mean nothing when they can't get here in time. Although I had no doubt we could take down a vast majority of them, I knew for sure Lucian could and would d*E for me. I won't let my son grow up with his father again. Get in the car, Lucian, I tell him, not taking my eyes off my father. My father smirks as if he won, but he hasn't, and he won't. Lucian's back brushes my arm as he glances around, realizing my father had called in the troops. He growls, pushing me behind him, but I grab his arm, and he glances at me. We need to leave, he tells me through the mind link. Get in the car, I tell him, holding eye contact with him. He growls, pushing me toward my car. Get in your car. I tell him again, and he stops looking at me before glancing around before his eyes meet mine again. Marin, what are you doing? He mind links. What I should have done years ago, now get in the car. I refuse to be seen as hiding behind you. I tell him using the link. Lucian blinks at me before growling. I am not walking away until I know you are safely in that car, Lucian growls loud enough for everyone to hear. Listen to your mate Marin. It's time to leave, my father says, softly. He actually sounded like he didn't want it to come to this, which I thought was odd considering he ordered them here. The reputation all came down to reputation. Well, looks like I was about to earn mine. Lucian nudges me toward my car, but I don't budge. Do not ask me to walk away, he murmurs, and I knew everyone was waiting for the big bad blood alpha to drag me away kicking and screaming, but if Lucian truly meant what he said, that I was his equal, he would do this for me. Please, just this once, I mind Link, and he looks around me then growls angrily before leaning down and pecking my lips. He touches you. I will kill him, he mind Links. No, you won't, but no one is D*G here today. Just get in the car. I tell him and he reluctantly pulls away, looking at me. You're not, he whispers. I am. Now, go, I tell him. Lucian curses, not happy, but suddenly understands. He shakes his head before he chuckles. Just this once, he says, pecking my cheek and walking off toward his car. The murmurs of him walking away from me and leaving me out in the open were loud. Shocked, he would let his Luna fend for herself. They didn't realize I didn't need to hide behind anyone. I was born an alpha. It was my birthright, and now I am going to claim it. Run along, Marin, my father says, watching Lucian climb into his car. No. I tell him, and he growls, taking a step toward me, and his eyes dart over my shoulder to Lucian's car before flicking to me. Everyone here will now bear witness, I call out to everyone. My father growls. However, I keep going. I, Luna Marin of Nightshade Pack, challenge you, Alpha John, for my rightful title and birthright as Alpha to the Shadow Pack. I challenged. The collective gasp was loud as I challenged my father, who seemed stunned that I would dare challenge him. My father glances around at his pack, witnessing the reactions of his members to the challenge. If he backs down, he will look weak, and I know he won't. He growls. So what will it be, Dad? Stand down and submit or accept the challenge, I tell him. You foolish girl, he growls before looking around and pressing his lips in a line. Challenge accepted, next full moon council arena, he snaps before leaning toward me. You are going to get yourself killed. Rescind it, you don't stand a chance, and you know it, that is where you are wrong, father. 17 years you trained me, I didn't suddenly forget, I was taught by one of the best, yes, taught by me, you think you can beat me. You spent years as a rogue. Think of your son. I am thinking of my son. I can and will win. You forget why a title is handed down to the eldest child, each generation stronger than a predecessor. Step down, Dad, you're looking at the next generation, someone that rivals you now, your mirror only stronger. You told me that, promised growing up, I would be stronger than you one day. I saw no one bigger than you growing up. I held you up on a pedestal. You were my hero, but not anymore, I tell him before turning my back on him and walking toward my car. Ava presses her lips in a line trying not to smile. You're making a mistake, Marin, my father calls, but I keep walking to my car and open the driver's side door. You have until the next full moon to back out, my father says, earning some gasps from his pack. He didn't want to fight me. What father would? Even one who he claims to hate, no one wants to potentially kill their child. Which is exactly why alphas handed the title down. Rarely are they challenged for. It was also unheard of for an alpha to offer the challenger a way out. Don't hold your breath waiting for me, father, I would hate for the challenge to be over before it starts, I tell him, giving him a nod. He nods before folding his arms across his chest, his face turning hard as he tries to hide whatever emotion it is he is feeling. Climbing in my car, I start the car only for the passenger side door to open. I look at it to see my sister sit in the passenger. "What are you doing?" I ask her. "What I should have done the day he banished you." "I am coming with you," she says, plugging in her seatbelt. I smile, and put the car in reverse. Chapter 87. Marin. We drove out of my father's pack territory. Lucian followed close behind me, and just before we jumped on the main road, he flashed his lights behind me before his voice flitted briefly through my head. "Pull over," he growled. He was angry, and I quickly pulled over to the shoulder of the road and away from the traffic. Ava glances at me, and I put the handbrake on. "Wait here," I sighed, climbing out of the car at the same time Lucian did. I readied myself for his anger. He stalked toward me, and I was about to defend my actions when he grabbed my face and kissed me, pushing me against my car. "Don't ever do that again," he mumbled against my lips, his fingers tangling in my hair as his tongue invaded my mouth, kissing me angrily before he gr0aned, and my face heated, knowing my sister was in the car while he devoured my lips. I push on his chest. "Lucian!" I squeak against his lips while pushing on his chest. He growls, mauling my lips while I look around, embarrassed at his public display. He growls at me, grabbing my hand and placing it on the center of his chest. His heart was racing beneath my hand, thumping so hard I worried he may have a heart attack. "You just scared the living daylight out of me." "Give me a minute," he growled while pressing his face into my neck and inhaling deeply. Lucian pushed closer, his entire body pressing against me, and I sighed, running my fingers through thick hair. And he was supposed to be the blood alpha, on the verge of having a nervous breakdown? "Don't ever make me do that again. Do you have any idea how hard it was to walk away and leave you there?" Lucian says, his voice pleading. "I didn't mean to scare you, I am fine." "Everything is fine," I assured him. He sighs, nodding his head before cupping my face in his hands as he steps back. "You challenged your father," he said, and I couldn't help the stupid smirk that split onto my face at his words. I wasn't sure if he wanted to kill me or laugh. He clucked his tongue and shook his head. "You better win because if I kill your father, you can't blame me for it," he tells me. "No one is killing anyone," I tell him, and he presses his lips in a line. I know he was angry about learning my father knew all along about Valyrian being his, but what's done is done. We can't go back and change it, so there is no point in dwelling on it. My phone rings loudly in the car, and Ava sticks her head out the passenger window. "What about your sister? I don't trust her to stay with us." "I know she is your sister, I didn't ask, and I wasn't going to, and she can stay at the hotel," I tell him, and he nods, looking over my shoulder, and so do I. Ava waves my phone to me. "Hospital. About some girl named Emily," my eyes widen, and Lucian lets me go. I race over to take the phone from her. My hand shook as I held the phone to my ear. "Hello? Luna Marin," says a deep baritone voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, you're speaking with her," I replied. "I am one of the doctors taking care of Emily. I was wondering if you are available to come to the hospital. You are her only listed contact, and we have no one listed as her family." "Yes, correct, she has a son, but we still haven't located him, and her only other relative, her mother, died a few years ago." "I see. Is it possible you can come to the hospital?" the doctor asked. "Yes, I was heading over anyway." "Is everything okay?" "I'm afraid not," Luna, but it is best explained when you get here, he tells me. Lucian grips my shoulder, and I nod. I'll be there soon, I tell the doctor before hanging up. Emily? Lucian asks, and I nod, dialing Zoe and Macy before merging their calls. They both answered at the same time. What's up? Macy asks. It's Emily, on my way, Macy says, hanging up. I will get Dante to take Casey, Zoe says, hanging up as well. A lump forming in my throat before looking at Lucian. I need to go. Can you take Ava back to the hotel for me? Do you want me to come with you? I shake my head. No, Zoe and Macy will meet there, but can you pick up Valyrian? Of course, Lucian looks over my shoulder. Ava, she sticks her head out the window and looks at him. You're coming with me, he tells her, and she looks at me. I nod to her, and she climbs out of the car. Turning back to Lucian, he kisses the side of my mouth. Ring me if you need me to come over, he says, and I nod. Unable to form words right now, swallowing down my worry, I take a deep breath before turning and back to my car and climbing in. I don't even remember the drive to the hospital, I was on autopilot as worry ate me, praying for some miracle that she would be all right, yet the doctor wouldn't have called if she was. No news is good news. News always means something to worry about. Pulling up at the Pack Hospital, Macy rushed toward the front door, and I called out to her. She stops and turns, concern etched into her face, her eyes blurring with tears. Reaching her, Zoe pulls into the car park, zooming past us and into a vacant parking spot. She jumps out still in her pajamas and slams the door. Zoe looked like crap and ran over her to us, looking somewhat pained. But still, she came. Emily, she asks, hitting her key fob and locking her car. I just got here, I tell her, and she nods before we all walk toward the front doors. We walk to the lift, catching to the correct floor. Sort out the council stuff? Zoe asks, straightening her pajamas like it would somehow make her look more presentable. Macy pulls a hair tie off her wrist, pulling Zoe's hair into a bun on her head and tying it. Yep, I challenged my father for my title, I tell them as the door opens to our level. You what? Macy asks, yet my eyes were on the room I knew was Emily's. Doctors were rushing in and out everywhere. We pick up our pace. Walking into the room, the doctors looked like they were getting ready to run her somewhere. The doctor, noticing me, walks over to me, his notepad in hand, and he tucks his pen behind his ear. Luna, I'm Dr. Porter, he says with a grim smile, offering me his hand before his eyes darted to Zoe and Macy. He offers his hand to them. You are? Family, they both say simultaneously. The doctor's brows pinch, making a deep crease between his eyes, but he turns his attention back to me. The doctor sighed, pulled his glasses from his face, and rubbed his eyes before looking over at Emily. As you know, Emily has been having trouble fighting off the infection, and we had to remove her leg, I nod, having already known that. I glanced at Emily and swallowed nervously, watching as nurses fussed over her, unplugging machines. Doc pulls the pen from behind his ear and passes the notepad to me. I glance at it before looking at him. We need to take Emily back in for surgery, he says slowly, letting that sink in. But she will be all right. Zoe says, and I look at her. Her lips quivered, and the doctor smiled sadly before turning back to me. There is a chance she won't survive the surgery, the infection spread, and her other leg has turned gangrenous. This is a DNR. We need to know what your wishes are. What's that? Zoe asks. Do not resuscitate, Macy tells her, and Zoe makes a strangled noise like a whimper. I glanced down at the paperwork in my hand. You want my permission to let her die? I ask, shaking my head. Luna, you need to think of the future, I shake my head. I am. Emily has a son to live for. The answer is no. Do the surgery. She will pull through, I tell him, and he sighs and reluctantly nods his head, taking the clipboard back from me. Luna. Dr. Porter says. No, she will pull through. I look over at Emily with tubes hanging out of her. She can live without legs, and she would pull through. I had to believe that. I had to hang on to that. We are ushered out while she is prepped for surgery and taken away. We waited hours in the corridors for any news about Emily. All other issues suddenly seemed small in comparison. Macy paced frantically, and I was surprised she didn't run track into the floor. Zoe stared off blankly, biting her fingernails, a terrible nervous habit she had, but I let her go. While I sat numb to everything going on around us. After what felt like eons, the doctor came down the corridor, and we all jumped to our feet. He held his hands out, and we waited to hear what he had to say. She is stable, they are moving to one of the wards soon, but the infection is moving rapidly throughout her body and putting pressure on her heart. We will be running more tests overnight, but she is a fighter, Dr. Porter tells us, and I let a breath of relief. Can we see her? I ask, and he nods. Yes, just let them get her settled first. She is not responsive, as you know, and I don't see that changing any time soon, but for now, she is stable. I will have a nurse come get you when you go in, he tells us, and we all nod. Macy grips both of us, tugging us to her. Thank the goddess, Macy whispers, squeezing us both tight. Chapter 88. We got to see Emily and sat with her for a while. We all sat with her for about an hour. Tubes hung out of her nose and mouth, her arms covered in different lines. The room smelled heavily of antiseptic, and I could even smell the infection running through her veins, and smell the antibiotic drips hooked up to her. Emily did not deserve this, nobody did. Looking down at her, she looked so frail, her skin pale, and I found it hard not to break down. Emily was always so bubbling and a chatterbox. Seeing her like this was heartbreaking. I prayed she woke up soon, prayed she would pull through this. I would even drink her terrible coffee. God, I wished I could be drinking that horrible coffee. I wouldn't even complain if it meant she would come back to us. We weren't sure if she could hear us, but eventually, Zoe had to leave to help Dante and Macy wanted to go home and check on Taylor. Sitting next to Emily, I held her hand, rubbing circles into the back of her hand. You hold on, Em. Benny needs you, I told her. Kissing her hand, I tucked her blankets around her and reluctantly left. It was dark as I climbed into my car. It was the middle of the night, and I listened to the radio as I headed toward the old commune and to Emily's caravan on the way home. I was mentally and physically drained, and all I wanted to do was go home, see Valyrian, and crawl into bed beside my mate. The commune was all mud and puddles, the rough terrain a little slippery since the storm, yet I managed to navigate through to the back where Emily's caravan was. Pulling up beside it, I got out. Using the key Officer Derek gave me not long after she went missing, I unlocked the flimsy door. I stepped inside the tiny little place she shared with her son. Toys and stuffed bears sat on the bed they shared, a small TV perched in the corner, and the walls were littered with Ben's artwork. I saw 2 jars of her special-made coffee and chuckled. I see a blue duffel bag hanging on a hook on the wall. I grab the bag, looking for clothes with her son's scent on them before carefully bagging them, making sure not to taint them with my scent and hoping it would give Emily comfort. I tidied up a little before finding a picture of her and Ben taped to her fridge, both smiling as they stood out the front of the school. He was 9 years old, and her entire life, he was her world, and she was a good mum, quirky, but that's what everyone loved about her, and no one loved her more than her son. Emily worked off, and her only dream was that her son would grow up and become part of a pack and have the opportunities the other pack kids had one day. We all wished that our kids would be a part of something bigger than us. That they would achieve more than us. It is what most parents dream of for their kids. To give them more, watch them grow and succeed, knowing we got at least one thing right. Grabbing the picture, I put it in the bag for her when my phone starts ringing in my pocket. Lucian's name pops up on the screen. "Where are you?" he says, his voice frantic, and his fear suddenly smashed me through the bond. At Emily's place, grabbing a few things for her room, I'm hoping something with Ben's scent will help her hold on, I tell him. "Head home now. A Forsaken got past the borders. The border patrol has been chasing it for an hour, it keeps going to the commune. Get out now, Marin," he orders. "What?" I shriek, looking around nervously and at the open door to the caravan. "I am sending men to your location." "Get out now," he says, and I hurry to grab the bag. I rush out the door and lock it before running to my car. I chuck the bag onto the passenger seat and start my car. Looked around into the darkness of the night nervously. Dante is on his way. I hear Lucian say as I put the car in reverse. The car becomes stuck in the mud. The tires spin, yet the truck only groans as the engine's revs, spraying mud everywhere and up the side of my truck. "Marin? I'm stuck," I tell Lucian, grabbing the phone. My headlights light up the forest surrounding the commune. My breathing becomes louder as panic sets in. "Hold on, I am on my way," Lucian says, and I glance at the phone that was on the loudspeaker, sitting on the passenger seat. "What about Valyrian?" I asked, not wanting my son anywhere near here if a Forsaken is on the loose. "Tatum will watch him till my father gets here," Lucian says, hanging up. I try to drive forward, but the back wheels just spin, making a mess and the hole deeper. I curse. Just my luck. What is the saying, it happens in threes? Well, I hope this is the last of my bad luck today. The commune was eerily quiet, and I cracked my window just a little to hear the sounds of howls and wolves in the forest. I stared out the windshield. My heart raced, waiting for Dante or Lucian to get here. I refused to get out of the car. I had watched one too many movies and knew that was a bad idea. "You okay?" Lucian says through the mind link, and I could feel him getting closer but still a fair way out. "Yes, fine, just a little freaked out, this place was creepy, and I don't know how Emily lived out here. Yet she loved her little spot." "I will be there soon, just keep talking to me," Lucian says. I explained about Emily, not that he didn't already know he had been ringing me all night checking in. But rambling was better than panicking when I saw a wolf run out of the treeline, 2 border patrols chasing after it, and my eyes widened as I saw them tear into the wolf. The wolf turned and beelined straight toward my car. Only it diverted toward the caravan at the last second, clawing at the walls before snarls sent it running again. It seemed too small for a normal Forsaken and it tried to run back toward the treeline to escape, terrified. I watched. "Marin," Lucian says as I watch the 2 border patrols rip into it. Its howls are horrifying to hear when it is flung across the dirt and suddenly shifts or tries to. My heart lurches in my chest as I see the figure get to its feet. Semi-shifted, its body still covered in fur, its limbs were deformed until it looked at me, and I instantly recognized that face. It was the only recognizable trait he had. He looked like most Forsaken until he shifted only smaller. My heart nearly stopped, and I don't even remember opening the car door as I saw one of the patrols go to rip into him. His petrified eyes, so much like his mother's, widened as I ran toward them. "No!" I screamed. The sound that left me was more of a strangled wail as I screamed out to them. One of them tackles him, tearing into his neck and shoulder before jumping back and looking at me, running toward them, waving my arms frantically. "Please, G0D, no!" I cried, skidding on the ground as I fell to my knees next to his body. The border patrol tried to shove me back, but my claws slipped from my fingertips and slashed at them, an angry growl escaping me before grabbing him. Sobs racked my entire body as I smoothed back his hair, looking at what had become of him. He was deformed, and it shouldn't be possible. How was it possible he was just a boy? He had no wolf yet. One of the patrols shifted back and reached for me. "Get a ambulance now!" I screamed, clutching onto him and protecting him from the patrols. "He is a Forsaken," the guard says. I shake my head, and his eyes flutter open, bloodshot and rabid, but I hold him tighter as he thrashes, snarling and growling, trying to ATK me, but I knew this boy, this wasn't him. Someone had done something horrific to him, but that wasn't who he was. His wounds were horrific, and he eventually passed out in my arms. His slow heartbeat was the only indicator that he was still alive. "Call for help!" I wailed as tears streamed down my face. "Luna," the young patrolman questioned. "He isn't Forsaken. He is a child!" I screamed, baring my canines at them as they slipped from my gums. I hear the mind link open as the border patrol orders for an ambulance. It's okay, help is on the way," I whisper to him. "Luna," the patrolman says, grabbing my arm, but I shake him off. "Don't touch me," I snapped. "He is dangerous," he tried to reason, but I didn't care. I had known this boy since he was in diapers and watched him grow. I didn't care how dangerous he was family, part of my village. "He is not dangerous. He was trying to come home to his mother," I growled at them. "Hang on, Ben, hang on for me," I whisper, clutching him closer while my hand pressed against his gaping wound, holding it shut, trying to stem the bleeding from his shoulder. Hearing a car, headlights light up the clearing and I see Lucian jump out of his car frantically. He raced toward me and I could hear sirens in the distance on their way here. "Marin!" Lucian screamed at me fearfully because I was so close to the mutated wolf. "It's Ben, it's Emily's son," I choked out, turning my attention back to the boy in my arms, or half-boy. Lucian grabs my arms trying to pull me away, but I shove him off. "Nobody touches him," I snarled at him. "I would not allow them to kill him, I don't care how dangerous he is." "Marin!" he snarled. "Tell them to stand down," I growled, and Lucian growled, looking at them, and nodded for them to back off. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.